Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day. We'll be talking about the most recent episode of Andor. I know I'm a little behind on this one. I've been super busy with other things, but I wanted to get this done because I really think episode 7 is worth talking about. I'll give my general review, and I'm not going to lie. When they announced that Episode 7 would be a little bit different, a step away from sort of the arc structure that the rest of the show has, I wouldn't say I was worried because if anything the show has at this point earned my trust, but I definitely thought that I would enjoy this episode less than the more sort of structured prior ones, but actually, that's not quite true. I thought episode 7 was great. This wasn't a throwaway episode. Really, it was the connective tissue between what has happened and what will be coming next. That's all I want to say without giving a spoiler warning. So let's get right into the episode. And I really want to focus on this episode in chunks. Things that I liked about main moments. Let's start with the ISB meeting. And we're seeing both the strengths and the weaknesses of the Imperial system at this point when it comes to maintaining order. The strength is that they've got an almost unending amount of assets to make vast changes across the galaxy. The weakness is, of course, that they not only use those powers for evil, but don't recognize how they're weakening their own system. I thought that was a really smart way to handle what's going on here, and is definitely a step above what most Star Wars shows do when it comes to talking about Imperial power structures. I love that Luthen realized that the Empire would terribly overstep their boundaries and ratchet up the way they've been really messing with the people of the galaxy. I really like his frog boiling in water analogy, where if they tighten the fist slowly, you don't even realize you're being choked. We sort of talked about that in prior episodes, albeit in a different context, about how people are stepping out against not only the excesses of the Empire on a dramatic level when people are murdered or massacred, but also the mundane elements of the Empire that weigh on the populace after time. The end of the episode illustrated this in a really beautiful way. It showed the harsh reality of the machine. Cassian did, at least in this situation, nothing wrong. True, he was a little on edge, but he had nothing to do with whatever was going on the planet, and he's arrested. He's thrown in front of a judge. He's told not to argue his case because it'll break the law, and he's sentenced to years in jail. The system is broken beyond belief. We also see at the very beginning Yularen stating that there will be retroactive penalties assessed to people already in jail. Like, this is just awful. And another one of the weaknesses in the Imperial system is that so few people recognize this, or at least are willing to say nothing. Even if you're fully on board with the excesses of the Empire and their tyranny, Dedra Meero seems to be the only one who realizes that they're playing right into the rebels' hands. They're being overtly evil. They're giving people a thing to look to in order to rebel. Just a really interesting discussion. Not the first time we've seen this. Usually it's in context to things like the Death Star. For example, the destruction of Alderaan and the subsequent destruction of the Death Star itself ended up causing a lot of worlds to more openly or sometimes covertly support the Rebel Alliance. This is like the very beginning of that. People are being forced into action because the Empire is showing who they really are. I think it'll be very interesting to see how this affects other characters. We've already seen how Cassian's mother has essentially found a purpose for living and wants to stay to fight the good fight. Cassian seems apprehensive about this, and he sort of realizes that there's a burden on his shoulders for doing what he does. I, however, am wondering about how two individuals are going to react. Meero and Syril Karn. I don't think Meero is ever going to turn out to be good. I think she's going to be evil the entire time, and she's going to be someone that we could sort of hate to love within the ISB because she is just so coldly competent. That scene where she fights off the inter-office politicking was just great. I don't think she's ever going to turn good. I do think the show is going to end with her probably having a knife in the back, representing how the Empire is largely falling apart because it's not listening to the people who know what's going on, even if they're evil as well. Syril Karn, I really don't know which way his story is going to go. He's been somebody who has been willing to put the boot down when he thinks he's doing the right thing. Like, he is fully on board with breaking into people's houses, abusing them, doing whatever necessary, if he thinks it will help him catch a killer. Now, however, things are getting even murkier. For one, in this episode, he seemed a bit put aback when he was told essentially that his record could be expunged just for whatever reason because he had people in the know. And with the Empire becoming now more overtly tyrannical, I wonder whether he's going to stay on board and get more evil himself, or whether something will break for him. Anyway, back to the ISB. I will say I didn't realize that was meant to be Yularen. For some reason, I didn't have my subtitles on. I don't think he especially looks like the movie version of him, but sort of like the Clone Wars version, I guess. I really like later on how Miro is getting to the heart of the issues, especially in regards to how sectors work. Basically, the Empire is divvying out power through this sector system, but as we see in the show, these sectors and the people who run them have conflicting interests, and they're working for personal power as much, if not far more, than the defense of the Empire. This is something that was touched on in Star Wars Legends in, for example, the Essential Guide to Warfare. Rebels would take into account the political realities of the sector splits and would use one sector to launch or retreat from an attack on another sector, knowing that the Moff or Imperial or Governor in that sector won't be as eager to chase them, using his resources to help come to the defense of who is essentially a political opponent. Anyway, I like that. I also really like the Mon Mothma Luthen stuff. I think there's a little less to talk about here. I do have a theory, but when Luthen is learning what the ISB is talking about, I assume that he was listening to some sort of pirate radio system. However, I now think it's probably a mole within the ISB. I put out a whole clip about who I think that mole is and my reasons for doing so, which I'll link in the upper right hand corner. I don't want to duplicate content too much. There's not a whole lot I want to break down on the Mon Mothma side. I will say it's interesting how good of a facade she's putting up. I thought the Empire probably had her under a bit more suspicion at this point, and I guess they do because there's spies following her and whatnot all the time, but it seems like publicly she hasn't been approaching the stage we know she'll eventually get to when she openly stands against Palpatine. The dialogue for the dinner party was great, as was, I think, all of this episode. I really liked Andor going back and seeing his old friends and family on Ferrix. I think we now have a good idea also about what happened in Cassian's youth. After his father was killed, it seems like he took up arms against clone troopers, and that's what ended him in what appears to be Imperial prison service and military service, as we saw alluded to in episode 2. Everyone's been talking about the beach scene. That was great. The music, the aesthetics, everything. Fun little detail, I saw on Twitter that it was actually Sam Witwer, voice of course, Starkiller and Palpatine in the Clone Wars, playing that Stormtrooper. He has such a range and voice that even though I've talked with Sam Witwer before, we've played Star Wars Squadrons together, I did not recognize his voice at all. But yeah, that's really all I have. I'm very curious to see how this season ends with the final 5 episodes. Obviously, we'll have a prison escape sequence. We'll probably have something to do with the partisans. Other than that, it's really up in the air. I'm most curious again about Cyril Karn. He's always been a very well done character to me, as is really everyone in this show, and it's just great what they've managed to put together. So I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. Be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.
Terror attack and robbery have taken place at the Imperial Armory on Aldani. Multiple fatalities reported.
What happened?